The moment she said, "Pay your share and go," in front of everyone at the table, something inside me snapped, but not in the way she expected. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't even react the way her friends clearly wanted me to. Instead, I just nodded, reached for my wallet, and calmly said, "Sure." What happened next wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was enough to leave that entire table silent, and her expression frozen in a way I'll probably never forget. We had been together for almost 2 years, and for most of that time, things felt stable, at least on the surface. She liked going out, dressing up, and being the center of attention, while I preferred quieter evenings and meaningful conversations. Still, I adjusted. I picked up extra shifts, paid for dinners more often than I could afford, and told myself it was worth it. "You're too serious sometimes," she would say with a laugh, brushing off my concerns like they were minor inconveniences instead of real feelings. Her friends never really liked me, and I could feel it every time we went out. They made subtle jokes about my job, my clothes, even the way I spoke. I tried to ignore it, but it added up over time. One night, after we got home, I told her, "They don't respect me." She shrugged and replied, "You're overthinking. They're just joking." That word, joking, became her shield, a way to excuse behavior that chipped away at me piece by piece. The dinner that night was supposed to be a celebration, her promotion at work. I had even bought her a small gift earlier that day, something simple but meaningful. The restaurant was one of those trendy places where everything is overpriced but looks good on Instagram. As we sat down, her friends were already laughing loudly, drinks in hand. "Let's make this a night to remember," one of them said. I smiled politely, but something about the energy felt off from the beginning. At first, it was the usual pattern. They ordered expensive dishes without hesitation, cocktails that cost more than my hourly wage, and appetizers no one really touched. I noticed how she didn't even glance at the prices. When the waiter asked if we wanted another round, she said, "Of course," without consulting me. I leaned closer and whispered, "Maybe we should slow down." She pulled away slightly and said, "Relax, it's my night." As the evening went on, the jokes started again. "So, what do you actually do again?" one of her friends asked, even though she already knew. I answered calmly, but she smirked and said, "Must be nice, not having much responsibility." I forced a smile, but I noticed my girlfriend laughing along. That hurt more than the comment itself. I checked my phone briefly, calculating roughly what the bill might be, and felt a knot tighten in my stomach. About halfway through the night, I excused myself to the restroom, just to breathe. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, why am I putting up with this? When I returned, they were all taking selfies, completely absorbed in their own world. I sat down quietly, and she leaned over saying, "Try to look like you're having fun." That was the moment I realized I wasn't a partner in her life. I was more like an accessory. When the bill finally came, it was worse than I expected. The total was enough to cover my rent for 2 weeks. The waiter placed it on the table, and there was a brief silence before her friend said, "So, how are we splitting this?" My girlfriend didn't hesitate. She looked straight at me and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "He'll pay his share and go. He looks like he's tired anyway." The table went quiet, all eyes on me. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. "Pay my share and go?" I repeated, just to be sure I heard correctly. She nodded, casually sipping her drink. "Yeah, don't make it a big deal." One of her friends chuckled softly. That's when I reached into my wallet, pulled out my card and said, "You're right. I shouldn't make it a big deal." But instead of calculating just my portion, I asked the waiter, "Can you split the bill evenly among everyone?" The reaction was immediate. "Wait, what?" she said, her smile fading. I looked at her calmly and replied, "If I'm paying my share, then everyone else should too." Her friends exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. One of them muttered, "I didn't bring enough for that." I shrugged slightly. "Then maybe we shouldn't have ordered like money doesn't matter." The waiter stood there awkwardly, waiting for confirmation, and I nodded. "Please go ahead." She leaned in closer, her voice lower now. "What are you doing?" she whispered, irritation replacing her earlier confidence. I met her gaze and said, "Exactly what you told me to do." There was a long pause, and for the first time that night, she looked unsure. The bill was split, and suddenly the laughter and confidence around the table disappeared. People started checking their phones, transferring money, and realizing the cost of their choices. I paid my portion without hesitation, signed the receipt, and stood up. "You're seriously leaving?" she asked, her tone now a mix of anger and disbelief. I nodded. "That's what you wanted, right?" I placed the small gift I had bought her on the table. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said, my voice steady. She didn't reach for it. No one spoke as I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hitting me like a reset. She called me 3 times on my way home, but I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a text came through, "You embarrassed me tonight." I stared at the message for a moment before replying, "You embarrassed me first." There was no response after that. The silence that followed felt heavy, but also strangely freeing. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth to anyone. The next day, she came over unannounced. "We need to talk," she said, standing at my door. I let her in, but I already knew what I wanted. She tried to explain, saying, "I didn't mean it like that. It was just the vibe." I shook my head. That's the problem. The vibe always comes before respect. She went quiet, realizing there wasn't much left to argue. By the time she left, we both understood it was over. Looking back, that moment at the table wasn't just about money. It was about boundaries, respect, and finally choosing myself. I didn't yell, didn't create a scene, but I made a decision that changed everything. Sometimes, the strongest response isn't the loudest one. It's the one that quietly shifts the balance. And if there's one thing I learned that night, it's this. Never stay where you're only valued when you're paying the bill.